The House of Commons erupted into chaos today as Reform UK MP Richard Tice directly confronted Prime Minister Keir Starmer over allegations of misleading the chamber. During the tense Prime Minister's question session, Tice stood up, unwavering, to call out Starmer's answers and expose a series of inconsistencies that left the Labour leader visibly rattled. The tension began when Tice, representing Rossendale and Darwen, rose to highlight the discrepancies in Starmer's previous statements.
I have to say, my honourable friend is doing a much better job than his predecessor, the Conservative Party chairman under Liz Truss, who has now joined Reform, which proves once again, if you vote Tory, you get Reform, and if you vote Reform, you get the Tories.
Speaking with measured urgency, Tice addressed the Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, during Prime Minister's questions earlier today, the member for Rossendale and Darwen may have inadvertently misled the House. Unfortunately, this misinformation led the Prime Minister to provide an answer that was not fully accurate. The chamber fell silent for a moment as MPs processed the implications of the statement. This was no ordinary point of order. It was a direct accusation that the sitting Prime Minister had provided misleading information in an official session.
I'm most grateful for your advice, Madam Deputy Speaker, because during Prime Minister's questions earlier today, the Member of Parliament for Rossendale and Darwen may have possibly inadvertently misled the House. The reality is that unfortunately, because of that, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister gave an answer based on that possible inadvertent misinformation. The truth, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that Lancashire County Council is carrying out a statutory consultation as to whether to follow the example of Labour-controlled councils, such as at Blackburn and Blackpool, as to whether to have a small, modest processing fee.
The Deputy Speaker attempted to maintain order, but the intensity of the confrontation only escalated.
Now, if only the Chair was responsible for the content of members' questions and answers, but unfortunately the Chair is not responsible for the content of answers or questions that members provide, and no doubt that he has now put his words on the record, he'll get a response privately.
Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free, and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Back to the chaos. Tice continued, emphasising the role of local councils in statutory consultations, specifically mentioning Lancashire County Council. He outlined how the council, following examples set by Labour-controlled councils in Blackburn and Blackpool, was considering the implementation of a small processing fee. By providing concrete examples, Tice framed the argument as both a factual clarification and a political critique. Starmer, caught off guard by the specificity and direct nature of Tice's challenge, struggled to regain composure. He attempted to respond, but his words stumbled and hesitated, highlighting the pressure he was under. The atmosphere in the Commons became electric, as MPs whispered and murmured in disbelief. Even those not directly involved in the debate were visibly affected by the unprecedented level of scrutiny. This confrontation is part of a broader pattern of Reform UK holding the Labour government accountable on multiple fronts. From challenging policy decisions to exposing inconsistencies, MPs like Richard Tice are using PMQs as a platform to demand transparency and accountability. The clash also underscores the growing influence of Reform UK in Westminster, as more Conservative defectors and independent voices find a political home in Tice's party. Observers noted that the dynamic between Tice and Starmer exemplified the high-stakes theatre of modern British politics. One political analyst commented, "This isn't just about policy, it's about perception. When a Prime Minister is publicly called out for misleading MPs, it undermines both authority and credibility. Reform UK is capitalising on this at exactly the right moment." The fallout from today's PMQs is likely to continue reverberating across Westminster. With the public closely watching proceedings, every word exchanged carries weight far beyond the chamber walls. For Starmer, the challenge is not only defending policy, but also regaining the trust of MPs and voters alike. Before we move on to part 2, it's clear that Richard Tice's assertive stance has signalled a shift in parliamentary confrontations. Reform UK is no longer a peripheral party. It is now a formidable voice in Westminster, unafraid to challenge the Prime Minister directly and publicly. The chaos in the House of Commons escalated after Richard Tice's scathing intervention. MPs on both sides were shouting, and the Speaker struggled to maintain control. Starmer, visibly rattled, attempted to respond, but his words came out disjointed, reflecting the pressure he was under. The intensity of the session was palpable, as Reform UK MPs seized every opportunity to highlight Labour's missteps and inconsistencies. Tice's point of order had set the stage for a wider confrontation. Other MPs, emboldened by Tice's challenge, began shouting follow-up questions, demanding clarity on the Prime Minister's policies regarding local councils, migrant housing, and statutory responsibilities. The chamber descended into near-total disorder, with the Speaker repeatedly calling for order, yet failing to fully contain the torrent of voices. Starmer attempted to regain composure, emphasising that local councils operated independently and that the government followed the proper statutory processes. Yet, each attempt at explanation was interrupted by Reform UK MPs, who relentlessly pressed him on the implications of misleading the House. The Prime Minister's struggle to assert authority highlighted the growing influence and audacity of Reform UK in the Commons. Observers noted that the session revealed deeper vulnerabilities in Starmer's leadership. One senior political analyst remarked, "When a Prime Minister is cornered in front of the entire nation and cannot provide clear answers, it undermines not just the policy, but their credibility." Today, Starmer was exposed as unprepared for the relentless scrutiny he now faces from Reform MPs. The tension was particularly high as MPs highlighted the potential consequences for British citizens, drawing attention to public frustration over government transparency. Tice underscored the point by contrasting the statutory consultation processes of local councils with the government's handling of migrant housing and integration policies. His arguments were direct, factual, and politically charged, resonating with MPs across the chamber. Reform UK's strategy was clear: expose Labour's inconsistencies while positioning themselves as the party willing to hold the government accountable. By framing the argument around fairness, public safety, and transparency, Tice and his colleagues created a narrative that Labour could not easily counter. The spectacle was not merely political theatre. It was a deliberate effort to shift public perception and highlight systemic failures in government oversight. As the session wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly volatile. MPs interrupted each other, voices rose, and the Speaker's authority was repeatedly challenged. Starmer's attempts at clarification were overshadowed by the assertiveness of Reform UK's MPs, leaving the Prime Minister appearing cornered and defensive. By the end of the session, it was clear that the confrontation had far-reaching implications. Starmer's credibility had taken a visible hit, while Reform UK had solidified their image as a bold, unapologetic force willing to challenge the government head-on. Political commentators suggested that this session could mark a turning point, not only in the public perception of Starmer's leadership, but also in the rise of Reform UK as a formidable parliamentary presence. The fallout was immediate. Social media erupted with clips of Tice's intervention, trending across platforms as viewers highlighted the Prime Minister's faltering responses. Analysts predicted that this confrontation would dominate headlines for days, further intensifying scrutiny on Labour's leadership and policy decisions. The aftermath of the explosive PMQs session left Westminster in shock. Clips of Richard Tice confronting Starmer were circulated widely, instantly going viral across social media platforms. Viewers were captivated by the Prime Minister's visibly rattled demeanour and the unflinching composure of Reform UK's MP. Twitter and TikTok erupted with comments, memes and debates, with the hashtag Starmer exposed trending nationally within hours. Political analysts were quick to weigh in. Many noted that Starmer's credibility had been significantly undermined, particularly in light of repeated claims of misleading MPs. The session highlighted a growing public perception that Labour was failing to uphold transparency and accountability. "This is not just a political embarrassment," said one commentator. "It signals a leadership under siege. Starmer now has to answer not just to Parliament, but to a frustrated electorate watching his every move." Reform UK's strategy had paid off. By pressing Starmer on policy inconsistencies and using the point of order to expose errors, Tice and his colleagues positioned themselves as champions of public interest and government accountability. Their assertive, fact-based approach resonated strongly with the public, many of whom felt their concerns about transparency, local governance, and migrant policies were being ignored. The viral reaction was amplified by grassroots political groups and Reform UK supporters sharing clips of the session, generating millions of views in just a few hours. Inside Labour, the reaction was tense. Sources suggest that several MPs expressed frustration with Starmer's handling of the session. Whispered conversations in the corridors of Westminster spoke of damage control, with aides reportedly drafting clarifications and press statements to address public outrage. Senior ministers were reportedly concerned about how the viral exposure could influence voter sentiment in upcoming local and national elections, fearing that repeated gaffes could erode the party's support in key swing constituencies. Meanwhile, opposition parties were quick to capitalise on the chaos. Conservative MPs emphasised that the Prime Minister's difficulties were evidence of Labour's lack of direction, while smaller parties highlighted Reform UK's bold stance as a model of parliamentary accountability. Media outlets covering the event stressed Starmer's faltering responses, framing the session as a humiliation and a turning point for Labour's image. Headlines such as "Starmer caught off guard" and "Reform UK exposes Labour weakness" dominated news cycles. Public sentiment mirrored the parliamentary drama. Polling conducted immediately after the PMQs session suggested that Labour's approval ratings in certain constituencies had dropped, while Reform UK saw a surge in positive perception. Citizens expressed appreciation for MPs who stood up against perceived government mismanagement, and the public debate about transparency and leadership intensified nationwide. In conclusion, the PMQs session was more than a routine parliamentary debate. It was a dramatic confrontation that exposed vulnerabilities in the Prime Minister's leadership, elevated Reform UK's visibility, and ignited public debate over accountability in governance. Starmer now faces mounting pressure to restore confidence, while Reform UK has proven that aggressive, well-informed parliamentary interventions can reshape political narratives and capture public support. The consequences of this session are far from over, and the coming weeks could define the political trajectory of both Labour and Reform UK. For Starmer, the challenge is clear: answer to Parliament, answer to the public, or risk further erosion of credibility.